Because if 32 of us did win by 32 votes, we'd be skinning our 32 teeth right now because we'd be in government. It really
supporting you, 63 of the 97
Yes.
councillors. You still hold that in terms of your numbers?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Spoke to Mark Golding on the program last week, and he said, Miss Hannah's numbers are off. He says the parliamentary support, MP support, he said it's about 50-50, and he said he's, quote, comfortably ahead in delegates.
Well, I think Mark would actually say that. I'm a little bit more experienced in political organization and the nuances and the relationships of the PMP, and I've sat one-on-one with persons. Some people don't want to come out publicly, some people can't, but I'm holding fast to my numbers.
So you want to tell us who are the 10 MPs you have?
Not right now, but what I will say is that certainly Denise Daly from Region 4, the region chairman from Region 4, Maurice Guy, Dr. Maurice Guy from Central St. Mary, he's also the chairman of Region 2. We also have Natalie Nita, who is MP for North Central St. Catherine and my campaign manager, Michael Phillips, who is a vice president, and I could go on, but I'm going to hold to that. But I will tell you in time.
Now, on November 7, about 3,300 delegates will be voting for the presidency. The president of the party, the winner, will become opposition leader and maybe prime minister at some point. Critics like Gordon Robinson have called the process undemocratic. You said in your manifesto, if I could call it that, that you're committed to expanding voting rights and that group members, not just delegates, should be able to vote. So one member, one vote, that's where you're going?
Yes, I believe that. One of the hallmarks of the PMP is actually listening to the voice of the people. And we are a grassroots organization and we get our policies. Back when Norman Manley moved the motion and said to the world that, look, we're not going to trade with South Africa, that actually came from a group in Manchester. And so we take our messages, we take our policies from the ground up, and I think it is unfair and undemocratic to just have one person who is a member of the group ethos, who the group is a person who plans in the constituencies and really are the activists, to only give one person that vote. And I think it should be extended to all members of the group. I think it should also be extended to individual members, because right now the PMP also needs to go out there and revive and rejuvenate and renew the senses of the country. And we need to go on a massive recruitment drive to really reposition who we are in the minds of the public and what we stand for, which are progressive policies to move the country forward. So I do believe in one man, one vote. I've always believed that, and I think it needs to happen within the party.
It's one of those things, though, that the party has been talking about for a little while, and it could very well be in another 4 years, in another 8 years, whoever is the next candidate for presidency again, that we're having the same conversation. So having said it, though, is it something that you're committing to go out there and push for change?
Absolutely. My experiences as a member of parliament, as a region chair, certainly walking all 63 constituencies and working with people, we take a long time sometimes to enact change. And one of the things that we have to do, and I've said in the way forward, which is at lisahanna.com, and it's, as you said, my personal manifesto coming from the ground, is that we need a revolutionized secretariat. So the general secretary, when I become president, should not be a parliamentarian. and they should be bolstered by 4 general secretaries. So we would have, at the beginning of the election cycle, really the time to implement the kind of revolutionary renewal that's important. For a long time, we've been focusing on internal contests, vice president's races, presidential races. We had a slew of by-elections in the last election term and in the last parliamentary year. And now I think we can settle down a little bit, take a deep breath and build from the ground up. And we have the time to do it.
And for revamping the party, including the secretariat. You mentioned there the role of the general secretary. You spoke of having IT experts on board and so on. But
months, we will have an unbeatable PMP if we do it right and if we go back to the people and stay with the people.
You mentioned, as you said, or you outlined rather, the plan for revamping the party, including the secretariat. You mentioned there the role of the general secretary. You spoke of having IT experts on board and so on. But on the block, the PNP just sent home workers. So where's the money for all this to come from? Empty promises?
No, it's not an empty promise. I mean, the general secretary is a salaried position, and we will continue to have that as a salaried position. And we are also a volunteer organization. Many persons come to the PNP actually supporting the PNP. At all times, there are several persons who fund the day-to-day activities of the party. As members of parliament, we do give a contribution from our salaries, as do councillors, and we're going to have to find creative ways. I can tell you, as treasurer, we went out there and we pounded the pavement and we actually raised money for the general election. So we're now going to have to get a little bit creative. We've lost basically half of our MP quota, so a part of that is not there. Our groups play dues, but also with a new face of the party, and if we bring back the unity and bring back the love, people will, as they have continued to do, fund our activities in the party, and I look forward to making sure that that happens, Dionne.
You have that as your slogan on the one hand, and on the other hand, there are all these allegations about you, saying you're a divisive figure, you're hard to work with, that you've been unable to unite your own constituency. So there seems to be this huge disconnect between the public persona and your public campaign and what is being said by people who have been close to you.
Well, I think that narrative has been perpetuated by persons who really have a personal agenda. And oftentimes people don't look at the other side of who Lisa Hanna is. Who Lisa Hanna is as the region chair who actually worked in the region to bring it to victory. Who Lisa Hanna is as a Minister of Culture, who led that ministry to significant strides and had a all-female managers and a permanent secretary. Who Lisa Hanna is in terms of standing with the PNP, working with our leaders in the PNP, and making sure that I've never turned my back on the People's National Party. There's really no doubt that there are persons who from time to time have personal agendas. They always have. And typically for persons like myself, women in politics, when you have someone who is strong and takes strong decisions and strident decisions and are not easily broken a lot of times, rather than saying that they're a strong political, they come out as divisive. I mean, we've had situations where there are internal conflicts in other constituencies where you've had councillors cross the floor to the JLP, but they don't get the same questioning and the same kind of expose. And I think over time that has bedeviled and plagued who I am because of that narrative that keeps being perpetuated. And I imagine that over time people will realize that that's not exactly true, because there are several persons who have come out endorsing me who were a part of the other campaign last year and who were not supporting me. There's one young woman, Rachel Thompson, who said, look, you know, I remember driving to St. Anne to campaign against her. And over time, I ended up working with her because she reached out. Karen Cross is the same thing. Rand Small is the same thing. So there are persons who said that, look, we never really knew you. And working with you, it's like a complete different situation. So bringing back the love for me is going out there, Dionne. My political experience over the 3 terms going into my 4th term has taught me a lot. I've also seen the electorate change dramatically, and they want more listening.
All right,
from their members of parliament.
Hold that thought for me. We're at the break. Let's go to our first break. We come back in a moment. Remember our hashtag, former President Portia Simpson Miller. So let me ask you about that, because she introduced you into the constituency. We saw during the overview a photograph of her hugging you. Did the relationship deteriorate?
No, not in my eyes. As a matter of fact, I love Comrade Portia Simpson Miller, and that was another narrative that was created when I was running for vice president to actually create propaganda on the ground with some of the delegates, because that is an argument that they know would have costed me in the election. But we worked very well together. I've learned a lot from her. Throughout my political career, she gave me sound advice. Even when on the night of losing the VP race, she hugged me and she said, Lisa, you're strong, you're going to work hard, your time will come. And as a young cabinet minister, I would seek counsel with her, and I miss her in the political arena. She's somebody who has an energy and an electricity. And there are many, many young women. She's a strong, strong woman. A lot of my courage and tenacity I learned from Comrade Portia Simpson Miller. And I wouldn't say that our relationship soured. I think over time, as I progressed more in the politics and she watched me grow, I think she took a step back and said, okay, there she goes. But she was the one that recruited me.
How would you have described the relationship at the point at which she was exiting politics? I think when the annals of history are written, I don't think Jamaica paid her the due respect that she deserved. When we lost in 2007, our administration, under her leadership, brought poverty down to 9%. Between 2011 to when we lost in 2016, it was her leadership that really fixed the economy, along with Peter Phillips as Minister of Finance. And I think she has been plagued in the same way that women are plagued with false narratives and focusing on the things that they wanted to bludgeon her with. They didn't look at her strengths. Her strengths were she was able to go internationally and to really negotiate with the IMF and other key players in the international arena to make sure that we got those deals. She was able to negotiate with the unions. She was able to hold the nurses and the teachers and the police. When Portia would walk into a room, there was this feeling of calm, Sister P is here, and she could get a negotiating agreement that everybody thought was impossible, and she really kind of anchored the country. And people have not, I think, really respected how she operated. I think they more focused on the fact that she was from the grassroots. She didn't want to be in the media. All of those different things, and I'm sad by that. But what was your personal relationship with her at the time of her exiting?
My personal relationship was good with Portia. Myself and Natalie, we sat right behind her, and she would always turn around. Portia has a wit, and she's very cheeky. So she would turn around and we'd joke and make jokes with the other members over by the JLP. And she would always say, "Little girl, you're good. My daughter, you're good." And that kind of relationship. So I do miss her.
So you don't think she ever bought into what you've described as a false narratives about your attitude to her, whether you had outgrown her, whether you thought you were bigger than her?
No, I don't think so. Because at every juncture, I went to Portia. If I was going to make a decision, I went to Portia. I would knock on her door at Jamaica House and at OPM and go to her. And I would call her on most occasions and say, "Look, what do you think?" Even when she came to conference the last couple of times, I sat beside her, made sure she was okay. She would pull me aside. She would say, "How are you doing? How is the constituency? What is going on? Come talk to me, don't talk to me." And she's that kind of person. So no. And I think sometimes too, in the politics, you learn, DIONNE, that you have to learn to filter a lot of the noise that is going to come, because everybody has information that them carry and them bring. And if you're not very clear, and if you don't have a strong support system, you will believe a lot of the propaganda. So that wasn't there. And even I remember when Lydia challenged me, I remember this well. And she called me and she said, "Little girl, how you doing?" And I said, "No, man, I'm going to pull through." And she said, "All right." So it's that kind of mother-daughter relationship that we had.
Again, going back to your manifesto, you say you want to transform the party. You promise to increase transparency in government, primarily in the award of contracts,
Yes.
and the employment of key personnel to state entities.
Correct.
When in government, you say we will work towards full disclosure and transparency. Those statements, though, do have to be interrogated in the light of some of the controversies associated with you. Let me go, for instance, to Pinnacle. Land in St. Catherine, said to be the birthplace of Rastafari. Now, there was a land dispute between St. Jago Hills Development Company, headed by Richard Lake, who is your husband, as well as a group of Rastafarians, not trying to interrogate the land dispute, but at the time, you were culture minister.
I was.
Facilitating discussions between the parties, and there were complaints about conflict of interest. How is it that you didn't see that as problematic?
Well, I actually removed myself from the process because at the time when Richard and I were not married at the time, we were cohabiting. But he is a businessman. He developed St. Jago Hills. As a matter of fact, because he learned of the lots at Pinnacle, he never developed those lots. And once I had learned about the issue, I think there was this feeling that somehow I knew about it and I was involved in it, and which was not the case. And I went to the Prime Minister and I said, look, in the best interest of transparency, please let Minister Pickersgill manage this. And we set about to have compulsory acquisition of the lots, and so that the Rastas could develop the lots. And as a matter of fact, when you go up there, those lots are not developed. And there is a place for Pinnacle. I think what has to happen now is they have to determine, the community, what they want to do with it. And I don't think they've come to any agreements. But I extricated myself from that. But
given the concerns that had been raised, why not make that declaration at the time? Because, for instance, the Observer reported February 9, 2014, said the committee established to deal with the issues has been directed to refer the matters related to Pinnacle to the Ministry of Water, Land, Environment and Climate Change. And this was said to be at the direction of the Prime Minister. And the Observer went on to say sources suggested that the move was to remove any conflict of interest between the Rastafarians and Youth and Culture Minister Lisa HANN, who has close ties with one of the interested parties. So knowing that that was a concern, that you were dealing with a situation in which you had a close personal relationship with one of the parties, why not come out and say, I acknowledge the conflict, I remove myself? Because what it certainly looked at the time is that Portia Simpson Miller had to step in and remove you from the conflict.
I can see how it would have looked that way. And perhaps in hindsight, making that declaration would have been the instant case. That would have been what should have happened. But I did communicate with the media. I did say to persons publicly that I am not dealing with this case because of the conflict of interest, and it has been passed on to the Ministry of Water. But I had really nothing. It was, as a matter of fact, it was...
There were some initial meetings, though.
There were some initial
facilitated by
meetings.
the minister while you were minister.
Absolutely. But there may have been maybe 2 meetings. And then once it got to a point where I went to the Prime Minister and I said, look, I'm not comfortable because it would appear to be a conflict of interest. I think this needs to happen. And she stepped in and dealt with it. But it was upon my initiation that happened.
All right, we're at the break. Let's go to the break. We're back in a moment. Of victory in the constituency was so significantly reduced. You just barely eked out a win this time.
But I won.
You won,
Yeah.
But, and you've pointed to the fact that there was a national swing against the party. But your critics have come out and said it's not just about the national swing, not just about the margin, but the fact that the PNP turnout in the constituency has been diminishing since you've been MP as well. And how can that be laid at anyone's feet except yours?
Well, the funny thing is, since 2011, we've gone from 42 seats to 14 seats. And we've had a situation where about 140,000 people abstained from voting in the PNP. In Southwest St. Andrew, for instance, Angela Brown-Burke's constituency, she lost nearly 4,000 PNP votes. In Mark's constituency, he lost over 1,500 votes. It was the lowest voter turnout, certainly much lower than 2016. So every PNP constituency lost votes except for Southwest Clarendon. When people talk about my margin of victory, you have 3 out of the 5 PMP presidents, who 2 of whom lost their seats, and Michael Manley in 1967, who won his seat by 47 votes, and then went on to become president 2 years later, and then won a landslide victory in 1972. I think it's not about a margin, because if 32 of us did win by 32 votes, we'd be skinning our 32 teeth right now because we'd be in government. It really is about leadership. It's really about how are we going to go out there? What are the qualities that a leader needs to have? It's really connecting with people. It's having courage. It's having passion. It's having vision for policies. It's being in the streets with people. It's being relatable. And it's really having a relationship with the common man. And it's really being fearless on the battlefield. And I have those qualities.
And
I
would leave it there. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you, but we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Come back next time for another edition of All Angles. Nearly said the other one. On behalf of the news and production teams.